Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for another round of Mind Your Puckin' Business with your host, Jeffrey Krentzman.
Thank you, Dougie Sticks, as always. Thank you. Coming to you, as always, from the beautiful studios of Undefeated Media here in Bergen County, New Jersey. This is the Mind Your Puckin' Business podcast, brought to you by our good friends at the Bamboozle Project. We thank them for their sponsorship of our program / podcast. As always, we greatly appreciate it. We encourage you to check out their website, which is conveniently across your screen already, thebamboozleproject.com. And when you are there, you could surf a million different, I won't say a million, but a ton of different clothing apparel options.
Just under a million.
Just under a million. Then, if you want, when you're on the site, you can go and you can just browse MYPB gear.
Mhm.
Summer gear is here, although the temperature doesn't feel like it, but that's fine. We're not complaining about that around here. But you can go on there. You could get MYPB apparel, MYPB water bottles. You can also look at their other stuff. And the promo code MYPB does not just work for MYPB stuff. It works for anything on the site. So use the promo code MYPB and save yourself 25%, not just on one item, but literally your entire order.
Everything.
You're saving a quarter of your order by using those 4 magic letters. This is episode 117, Ciento Diecisiete. It's getting a little bit harder to say.
Oh, hey now.
Ciento Diecisiete. I hope I said that right. I'm sure we're going to I'll get comments if I didn't, and I'm going to guess that I didn't say that right. So my apologies in advance. You can send us your questions at any time to mypbshow@gmail.com. You can DM us on the Instagram platform. That seems to be where we're most active and interactive with you guys. And that is on Instagram. And that is also across your screen. That is at Mind Your Pucking Business. All one word. Find us on the Instagram platform. You can message us. We can send us questions. We try to answer them pretty quickly. And you can watch the show itself on a video feed if you want to see our faces and why we are known to be made for radio, not camera, on YouTube. And you can also listen to us conveniently at any time, recap, go back, listen to old episodes on Spotify or iTunes.
Everywhere.
I think I ran through it all. Did I get it all?
That's pretty good.
Yeah, that was a lot. That was a lot. I need a nap. Now I need a nap. How are you?
Good.
So I want to say before we actually, it's not on the script here, but I'm going to throw it in. Happy first Father's Day to you.
Thank you.
Over the weekend. You and your
much.
Lovely baby daughter.
Thank you.
So you now welcome to the Father's Day plans.
First one.
There you go. That's awesome. And we hope for everyone else that's listening out there that celebrated Father's Day with your kids, regardless of how old that they are. I hope you had a good one and got spoiled and got to eat good food. So the New York Rangers, we haven't been on for a couple weeks. And as someone said the other day, I don't know if you saw this. Well, I think it was the other day. I think it was a week or two ago. Someone said, I don't understand why you guys are not on every week. Look, I'd love to be on every week and I have a real job, but if there's also not content, like there's not a lot going on this time of year. So I don't think you want me to sit here and talk about, the war in Russia. Like we're just not experts on it. It's not what we do. So the Rangers finally have a coach and something to talk about, and we're going to bring in some guests in a couple minutes to talk about it. The Rangers, so let's recap here. Let's go back a minute. So the Rangers are eliminated by the Devils on May 1st on a Monday night. And on Saturday afternoon, the preceding Saturday at May 6th, at about 5 o'clock, it comes out that the Rangers have fired Gerard Gallant. Now, I don't think at that time, and we've talked about this at length, that it was a huge surprise. I mean, you can tell maybe you were a little bit surprised, but it wasn't a shock, right? And the question is, whenever a team in any sport fires a coach, is, okay, who's the replacement? This guy is now in the memory, in the past. Who's the present? Who's the future? And the Rangers instantly at that point, if you went that day and on the next day, on the Sunday, and you read articles about who are the candidates, who are the names out there, Peter Laviolette came, I would say, as the number one candidate really since day one. Okay. But it was odd. It's odd to me that he on May 6th was the front runner, right? If you want to call it that. And again, Chris Drury holds things tight to his vest. So we're making assumptions here, but Peter Laviolette was certainly one of the top candidates for the job. Why it took till June 13th, last Tuesday, for them to hire Peter Laviolette is a little bit concerning to me, because if you love a coach, if you're a general manager of a team in any sport, right, and you have to hire at that point in time a vacancy position for your head coach, if you see the guy that you want, if that is your target, is your gut feeling, is who you think is best to lead your team, you're going to hire them right away, because any other team that needs a coach can hire him away. So there is kind of always like, I don't want to say an urgency, but you don't want to let things go, because if you let things go, you're going to lose some candidates, right?
Yep.
So why it took 6 weeks to hire Peter Laviolette has me a little concerned, because it doesn't make me think that to Chris Drury it was a slam dunk. Now, there are clips on Instagram of me saying it. I wanted Knobloch, the guy from Hartford, to get the job. I was not a huge fan of Peter Laviolette getting this job at all. I'm going to stay on record saying that. However, there was a tweet that came out last week that somebody sent us, and I will say that it resonated with me, and I've been thinking about it a lot.
Okay.
Look at the Stanley Cup final last week, and we'll get into the Stanley Cup in a little bit. And obviously, congratulations to Vegas beating Florida. Vegas, who just won the Stanley Cup, hired Bruce Cassidy a year ago, literally a year ago. And he was, if you were a Vegas fan, you could have sat there and said, why are we hiring Bruce Cassidy? He just got fired from Boston. He couldn't even win with the Boston roster, right? The other side of the Stanley Cup equation, which is the Florida Panthers, a year ago hired Paul Maurice in his first season. Well, you know what? He came from Winnipeg. He hadn't had success there. He'd been there forever. You're telling me that there's no one better than Paul Maurice, and Paul Maurice gets hired. So maybe there is a thought process that coaches just need to be put in their right position. And you can get fired from a job, and Chris is writing in, and I could see that, and Chris is the one that actually sent me the tweet, which was a great idea, which is, look, let's look at this. If you want to look at it as a glass half full position, that these people were fired from jobs and led their team to the Stanley Cup in the first thing. Due diligence, know who all your potential candidates are. So I would agree with that, Chris, but here's the thing. It shouldn't take 6 weeks to do due diligence. It's a long time to do due diligence. It's not like there were a ton of candidates. Now, the Rangers also get screwed here. If you're like me and you don't love the Laviolette hiring, you also have to understand, and it's hard to grasp it and cope with it, which is this year, there just were not a lot of good coaching candidates out there. So you can only hire your position that's available with the candidates that are available at the time your position's available. And for 2023 in the offseason, there's not really a dead giveaway awesome candidate.
Which makes you wonder if during the 6 weeks, who was their number one choice that they couldn't get?
Well, that's all part of it. Now, we'll never know these answers, right? Here, but I've said this
like ESPN 30 for 30.
Yes, I have said this for a while. For the last 7 weeks here. Chris, if I'm Chris Drury, and the press conference I believe is today at the practice is at MSG about announcing the head coach. You can't sell me today that, okay, well, you know what? Peter Laviolette was my first choice all along. We got rid of Gorgolan, and Peter Laviolette was my first choice. If he was your first choice, you hire him 6 weeks ago, right? And you can sit here and say, well, maybe someone else was going to come available. Maybe Mike Sullivan in Pittsburgh was going to come available, and I would have liked that. But you also, the time that you spent waiting for Mike Sullivan, if that was the case, and we don't know that it was, I'm going to use him as an example. You're also risking losing the coach that you really want if that coach was Peter Laviolette. I don't know. I mean, look, I don't love it. So I don't know.
Yeah.
But at least it's over, right? At least now we know who the answer is. And the other thing to me, the Rangers last night, and I don't want to say it's a surprise move. It's just the name was a surprise. Announced that they're hiring as an assistant coach Michael Pekka. Now, if you remember Michael Pekka, he spent most of his career with Buffalo and the Islanders, if I'm not mistaken. And Ranger fans will remember him more, obviously, from his Islander time. But Michael Pekka, if you read this morning, and I've spent some time this morning reading because I'm like, I didn't even know this dude was coaching. Supposedly, his background in coaching to date is all about trying to develop younger talent. That would be what they need. The other thing with Peter Laviolette is he is not known at all as being a coach that develops young talent. That is not his forte. So I would think, and Chris and I, who's involved in the chat right now, have spoken about this off the air, is that these discussions have had to have been had with Peter Laviolette to say, look, maybe your track record is not playing young guys, but here that you're going to have to adjust that. And these young players are going to need to have more time to play than maybe what you're used to in your previous stops in Washington and Nashville and all that. So,
Interesting.
yeah. I mean, you would think, and again, that was my reasoning for wanting Knobloch. Now, look, could I tell you that would I bet my mortgage that Knobloch's going to be a great NHL head coach? I have no idea. I don't know a lot about the dude. And to be honest with you, if I walked into Dunkin' Donuts today and Chris Knobloch was in there, I don't even know that I'd recognize him, right? I don't really know that I would. Peter Laviolette, those guys like that, I would.
But that tells you something. You much rather have that guy than Peter Laviolette.
Yeah. I mean, look, to me, like the other thing was the first thing I said that week when we were on, when they announced Gallant wasn't coming back, was that I just didn't want a retread. Like I wanted something different. And Peter Laviolette is the epitome of the retread coaches that were available this year. So here we are in the situation. But you know what? I'm not going to sit here and be negative about it. I'm going to embrace it because I'm the guy that sits here and pays for all the season tickets, regardless of who's behind the bench in the suit, regardless of who he does. I watch every game. So I've got to live with it. So I'm not going to necessarily be negative about it. I am going to try to take this is my conclusion. Okay.
In conclusion,
before we get to our guests who are waiting to come on, I am going to do this. I am going to go off the tweet that Chris sent in to us last week, which is the whole thing I just said. You know what? Bruce Cassidy just got fired a year ago. Paul Maurice just got fired. They were retreads, right? And look what they did. I am going to go off that mindset that Peter Laviolette just needs to be put in the right situation at the right time with the right group. And guess what? Somehow, some way in the 2023-2024 season, that perfect situation for Peter Laviolette miraculously becomes Madison Square Garden.
Nice.
And I hope I'm right.
I hope so too.
Would I bet on it? Absolutely not. But that's gonna be my hope.
Oh man.
So, all right, we're gonna bring in our guests. So Rangers.Ed podcast. We've had them on before. I've been on their show a lot. We don't really get to talk to them a lot in the summer and the off season, so it's kind of a little bit of a treat here. And we had two of them today. We have Coach Ed as well as Little Ed. So we will bring them in. How are you guys?
Good. How are we doing? Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. How are you, Little Ed? I think you're on mute, Little Ed. So there we go. We'll get that rectified and we'll be good to go. So, all right. So here's where we're going to start. We're going to do this a little bit different. We're going to talk about the coach, and then we had a Q&A. We opened up Q&A to our listeners yesterday, and they sent in a bunch of questions. So we're going to have you guys help me with some of the Q&A. I'm going to give you some of the harder questions that were sent in. But let's start with the coach. Let's go back. Let's go back to May 6th, okay? Gerard Gallant, it's a Saturday afternoon. It's a sunny Saturday afternoon here in the New York area. Gerard Gallant is fired. Again, I don't know that people are really shocked at it. Maybe you were surprised. What, at that point, let's start with you, Little Ed. Who was your first name that you said to yourself, okay, Gallant is gone. I want the Rangers to get who?
Knobloch.
Okay.
It's not necessarily getting him. They already have him, but I wanted them to give him the promotion.
Okay.
He had a nice little run with Hartford towards the end of the year, so I thought that was not the obvious choice, but I thought that was coming next.
Okay. Coach Ed, who was your choice?
I don't really remember if Laviolette was available, but he always has been one of my favorites. Unfortunately, when he was with the Islanders, I thought he did a great job, and they fired him for some reason, or they didn't re-sign him. I don't remember the circumstance. I'm a fan of his over the years. I mean, he's got the Stanley Cup championship. He's got the experience, and it's a question of what you were just talking about, how he's going to handle the young talent. And I'm hoping we could trust Drury that that's going to happen in their conversations.
Yeah, you would like to think that when any candidate, whether it was John Hines or whoever it was in Chris Drury's office interviewing for this job, Chris Drury made it very clear to them that, look, you've got to be able to play young talent. I mean, you can lean on your veterans. If that's your track record, that's totally fine. But there's got to be an emphasis on the younger kids as well. So, Little Ed, I was on the Knobloch train also. I was not I don't know a ton about him, but I just thought, hey, you know what? Maybe a little fresh idea, a younger coach, someone who is known to develop the youth which this organization needs. Because if Lavalette does not develop the youth and does not also deliver a Stanley Cup, this is going to be a very bad picture in 4 years here, right? Because these veterans are going to be gone, and you're not going to have a lot of youth either. So it's going to be a very bleak time on Broadway if he doesn't deliver on one of those two. So now we fast forward. So Coach Ed, you like Lavalette, right? So it sounds like you're more on his corner than we are. What about him do you think makes him the right choice? Is it that Stanley Cup experience? Is it the fact that he's been around the league and obviously knows the game? What would be your number one selling point for someone on Lavalette?
I think a lot, like I talked about when me and Eddie coach, I think a lot of times you're going to need that, let's call it a quote unquote kind of father figure to these young kids, that they're going to be stern, but he's going to talk to them. I think he'll talk to guys. I don't think he'll shut them out, but he's going to, he's going to put them in their place, let's say, for a better choice of words, when they need to be put in their place. I don't think the Rangers wanted to gamble on Knobloch because of we don't have a lot of time to test a new guy in the NHL. I don't think, not a question of a lot of time, but we're in a win now mode, obviously, with the goaltending, the vets and the young talent. So I think you need that veteran guy to come in, and hopefully, like you said, he's the one that's going to be the right mix.
Yeah, when I say choosing Knobloch or whatever, that's kind of like almost catching lightning in a bottle. I mean, Cousin Ed touches on our show that Drury has to worry about his job security also. So him taking a risk or taking a gamble on Knobloch is a huge risk for him personally also, and for us as fans. You never know what's going to happen, but Laviolette's obviously the safe choice.
That's he definitely is. I look at Lavalette, and again, I'm going to try and change my thinking over the next month to be positive. But he won a cup. But it was 2006, and if I remember correctly, I mean, I was only 26 years old then. But Cam Ward just played out of his mind for Carolina for 2 months, and that was a big reason why they beat Edmonton in that Stanley Cup final. But the experience is there. But at least At least we finally have our answer. I just can't look at this and tell me that Chris Drury loves the move, because if you love Lavalette, you would have hired him 6 weeks ago. Shouldn't have taken 6 weeks. He was available the entire time, but we'll see. All right, so let's talk to some off-season stuff. We opened up some questions yesterday. We got a ton of them in. I'm not going to get to them all, obviously. I'm going to ask you guys some of the harder ones, so I'll get your opinion on it. The first one was, will Brendan Othmann play at some point next season? Little Ed.
I think he's definitely going to play in Hartford. I mean, but I'm assuming you're asking for the Rangers. So, yeah. I'll say he'll get into some games, but he's not going to be consistently up with the Rangers. So he might be called up with an injury or something like that, knock on wood. But what I want them to do is to let him do it the right way with him and let him play in Hartford, let him dominate in Hartford. I mean, that's a really tough league. I went to a playoff game this year, and like the way that they play is right up his style. So let him continue playing that way, and then when he's ready, I think he'll be a dominant player in this league.
Okay, Coach Ed, you think we're seeing Othmann on Broadway next year?
I mean, I don't know the ins and outs of the contracts and that kind of stuff. Cousin Ed would be the one to answer that. But if he does start in Hartford, I see him on the Rangers at some point during the season. Maybe not out of camp, but I thought he had a great camp last year. I thought he might have made it. So I can't see him not being on the big team. It's going to depend on what happens with the rumors with Goodrow and who they move and stuff like that, I think. But I think he's going to have a cup of coffee up here for sure.
If Barclay Goodrow, and that's a good point, if Barclay Goodrow does get bought out, which is what the rumors are, and again, Chris Drury holds everything so tight to the chest that I don't really want to believe. It's very hard to believe anything. But if that is the case, the Barclay Goodrow signing was not good. I mean, I'm going to say it right there. If he came here for 2 years, and, granted, they went to the Eastern Conference Final in his first year, and he was brought here for experience and all that stuff. And then this year we're out in 7 games in the first round where they were lifeless in 5 games. That signing is a bust. So I'm just throwing that out there. And that would be.
I don't want him gone. I'm just listening to the rumors.
Yeah, no, but I agree with you. I don't necessarily want him gone either. But I'm saying if he is bought out, I don't know how anyone can sell to me that the Barclay Goodrow signing or his time here in New York was a good 2 years, because it certainly wasn't. All right,
definitely not. Trade maybe.
Yeah, I mean, look, I would rather the trade for cap implications, and at least you get something back, whatever that may be in return. All right,
Yeah.
the next question. So we had somebody put in, and it's just an interesting game that they like to play with us when we do this Q&A, the more likely game. So who is more likely, although I think this answer's unfortunately obvious, but I'll leave it up to you. Who is more likely to get traded, Lafreniere or Kreider? Coach Ed. We'll start with you, Coach.
I'd be shocked if they traded Kreider. I'm going to say Lafreniere.
I agree. Little Ed.
Yeah, I have to go with him too. I think Kreider's going to be a Ranger for life.
Yeah, the Kreider contract also would be harder to move, first of all. And secondly, if you were a buyer on the other end, obviously you're buying Lafreniere's potential. I mean, you know what Kreider is, right? So you can probably maybe get a bargain. So I would agree with the both of you that the answer to that question, the more likely person to get traded, not that I would want him to get traded, would be Lafreniere. Why don't we pull up Chris's comment, because he's like our contract guy behind the scene with Goodrow, the last one, Dougie, if we could pull him up. And that is, buyout is probably the better route because the cost to move Goodrow due to his cap and the flat cap means you have to pay a lot. All right, so buyout. But I'd be curious, Chris, if you want to put in the chat if you would want Barclay Goodrow bought out, because you know this stuff better than anyone. All right, next question. In the more likely game, who is more likely to finish their contract in New York? Artemi Panarin or Jacob Trouba? We'll start with you, Little Ed, on this one.
Ooh, that's a tough one. I'm going to have to say Panarin's going to finish out his contract because he's got the no move clause, and I don't think he's going to want to go anywhere ever.
Okay, Coach.
If you take out that no move clause, like I've been trying to do for the last 2 years, I mean, I know Drury's not happy with him, so I mean, that's what my feeling is. Obviously, after last year's playoff, and after this year's playoff, he's got to be disgusted. I'm going to say he's going to be trying to move him. I think he loves the way Trouba plays, and I think he's a heart and soul kind of guy of the team. And whether Panarin has that competitive nature that everybody talks about, it doesn't show. So Trouba shows that he wears it on his sleeve. So I'm going to say he's more of a Drury kind of guy, Trouba. So I say Panarin's out.
So my only problem with moving Panarin, and I understand, I see where the thought process is, and you're right, he's not going anywhere. He has a no movement clause. Is in the season this year he had 92 points, right? If you trade him, you've got to replace 92 points. It's a lot to replace. It's not necessarily an easy thing to do. Now, granted, his playoff performance was terrible. And last year, he kind of got a pass because he scored the Game 7 goal against Pittsburgh in overtime, right? So it kind of masked some of the inconsistencies, the rest of that series, as well as Carolina and Tampa. But, he's still in his career. He's played in 57 career playoff games. He has 46 points. But again, I don't think they can trade him even without the no movement clause because you got to replace a lot of points with whatever you're getting back. So I don't know who just wrote I guess it's a Devil fan who's watching. Devils broke Panarin so bad he shaved his head. Yeah, I don't know if you saw this. Artemi Panarin the other day shaves his head, or last week. Yeah. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, someone can correct me on it, had said that the reason he did it was to shave the evil off of his head from the playoffs. So he got rid of all the bad.
Britney Spears moment.
Yeah,
the evil spirit.
I'll say this. He actually, you know what? He looked pretty like a decent dude with the shaved head. I actually thought he looked pretty good. I kind of think he should keep it rather than his normal appearance. All right, let's go to some off-season stuff.
Wait. Before you go, hold on. I got a question for all three of you. You're the general manager. You're in charge. Anything you say goes. Move clause, whatever, is out the window. You can do anything you want. What's one thing each one of you would do so the Rangers go to the Stanley Cup? One move? What one
in
change?
The offseason?
Yeah, you're going to make a change. You can make one. You could do one thing.
Okay.
Each one of you bring up one. What's one thing that you can do that's going to help your chances be in the Stanley Cup?
That's a good question, and I was about to get into the offseason with them, but that's a perfect lead-in. I'm going to actually like plead the fifth. I'm going to let these guys answer that first, and then I'll think of an answer because that's a good question. We'll put the pressure on you, Little Ed.
Why do I go first every time?
So, all right. So this is a off season. You're Chris Drury. It's July 1st in a couple weeks on a Saturday, and the free agency market is open, and it's all hands on deck.
Yeah,
What
it could
is
be anything.
what are you doing in
Doesn't
the
have to be a
offseason?
player move. It could be, hey, we need Gatorade in the water bottles. It could be anything.
Kombucha for you.
Yeah.
Sign John Brancy to the full-time national anthem singer.
All right.
I like
That's
it.
a coach.
I-
That's a Coach Ed favorite there. I'm good. I mean, after seeing these playoffs, after seeing what shook out for the Stanley Cup final and stuff, you need a player like Matty Tkachuk or like a Mark Stone that's just going to take over a game, put a team on their back, and just, I don't know, just like carry them through the playoffs. Right now, I don't see the Rangers having that. You want to look to Mika Zibanejad or a Temi Panarin or even a Kreider to do that, and they don't really have anybody like that. I mean, we talked about Brendan Othman earlier. I think he's the type of player that's going to become that, but I don't want to rush him. So, I mean, I guess if everything was off the table, I would trade Panarin for Matty Tkachuk 1-for-1 right now.
Okay.
I mean, I don't really understand what you mean by everything is off the table because, like
Anything goes.
I guess anything
Perfect
the
goes.
other general
Yeah,
manager
perfect.
on board and we on board, like, you know what I'm saying? So if I had to pick, there you go. Panarin for Matty Tkachuk 1-for-1.
I like it. Coach Ed, your one move.
Well, what you're saying off the board is all that no trade nonsense and stuff. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna. This is a preview to my my draft thing that we're supposed to do next week. I'm moving Panarin. I'm signing Tarasenko.
Wow. Okay. That's interesting. I don't know. I mean, you threw this one at me. I didn't have time to think about it. I would say this. Somebody the other day was sending us stuff, and it made me think that the Rangers need, I think Molly Walker commented on it also, that the Rangers need to develop kind of a checking line identity, that they haven't had that for a while. So I would say maybe that. It sounds like they're also, in terms of offseason moves, it sounds like they're working right now to re-sign Halak as the backup goalie, which I'm fine with. I mean, I thought he did okay. So I don't really have a reason to go against that.
Great.
But I would say maybe develop a checking line identity. Someone that could stop a Jack Hughes line, for example, and can kind of counter the other team's top line. The Rangers don't really have that. They haven't had that for a couple of years.
Jeff, I don't want to cut you off, but I think the fourth line was the best line in the playoffs. So I think DC, and then if Goudreau sticks around, and then if they end up signing Mott, I think that's exactly what Drury's trying to do, is develop that consistent fourth line.
Yeah, I would agree, and that's exactly what they need. It wasn't that line wasn't as consistent during the year. I agree with you. Postseason they were great, and obviously Mott was, and they need to re-sign Mott. I mean, we already let him go a year ago to have to trade for him back. Hopefully, they're smart enough to do that and get him there. Let me ask you, Coach Ed, because I know you're like, this is kind of right up your alley, I believe. The other day, the Rangers announced an extension with Zach Jones. I have said from day one, and I don't know a lot about Zach Jones, but I've seen enough of him, and I remember when he played college hockey too. He just doesn't seem like an NHL defenseman to me. He just seems so small, doesn't have the body type. You have any insight in your previous coaching experience with Zach Jones? Should we be concerned with his body weight composition, or can he be a NHL defenseman in this league?
Well, if anybody has watched the playoffs for the last few years, you have to have size on the back end. That's how Vegas stopped Tkachuk. They beat him up. You can't have Fox and Jones in your lineup. In my opinion, it's ridiculous. So I don't understand the move unless they sign them at that and they plan on trading him. That's his salary. I mean, I don't know the ins and outs of the salary stuff. I don't pay that close attention. I don't have time, but that's my only idea they could say. What are you going to do? Get rid of Lindgren and put Zach Jones in there with Fox? I mean, you don't need another guy that's not physical. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Coach Ed, what do you think of? I mean, Little Ed, what do you think of Zach Jones?
I got to agree with Coach Ed. I mean, yeah, he could skate. He can move the puck. He's a phenomenal hockey player, but for the Rangers, it doesn't make sense because – and look, like he said, look around at any other Stanley Cup winner. I mean, even Cale Makar, like he's got that skating ability, the skill and everything, but he hits. Like that's how the Avalanche won last year. And like if Fox isn't going to get a little bit meaner and stuff like that, then that's the only person, or that's the only defenseman in the lineup that they can afford to play like that. Fox showed some glimpses of it last year in the playoffs, but it's not enough. So, yeah, he doesn't have to play like that. I'm not asking Fox to be that player, but they can't afford to have also Jones in the lineup playing that way also.
I agree. Yeah, I don't unless they're looking to trade him. Maybe that was part of it, like you guys had mentioned. That, but yeah, I'm not feeling
Salary
that at all.
cap's a big thing. So
yeah, and the Rangers are going to have some salary cap decisions with some deals coming up. All right, last question. So the other day, someone just sent in a question. We'll roll to them. We'll take a live question. Go ahead at the bottom. What do the Rangers do with Capo's contract expiring at the end of the season? Little Ed, you want to take? I know I've been calling on you first a lot. You want this one?
I'll take this one. I don't mind this one for number one.
I
think you got to see how he plays for the first half of the season, and if he's doing well, you sign him to a nice extension, kind of what they did with Hedl. If he comes out laying a dud, then you gotta think about trading him. I mean, it's unfortunate. I really love the way Kakko plays. I don't think he's gonna lay up another dud. I think he's gonna continue on his path and just. Well, it really depends on what we first talked about, Laviolette, obviously, right? But I think if he gets the more time, if he gets top line minutes, maybe some power play, we talked about it on our show. He should definitely be a top penalty killer. He's definitely that type of player. So I think if he gets more opportunities, he'll get the points and the goals and deserve an extension. So, like I said, I think Drury will sign him to an extension similar to Hedl if he performs.
I would agree. What about you, Coach Ed?
I kind of agree with that. I mean, I know Cousin Ed will start crying if he doesn't pan out with the Rangers because it's a waste of a number one pick. But not every number one pick pans out. And he might thrive somewhere else as long as they get the good return. If he doesn't do it this year, and not that he didn't wake up, he had a pretty good season. But if he doesn't turn into that number one pick type of guy, then I don't have a problem with them moving him for the right situation.
So that question that was just sent in was a perfect segue because I was about to say, Coach, was that I was talking about you last week with my son. We were talking about the Rangers. And
wow.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you why. We were in our kitchen. This was, I believe it was like last week or maybe 2 weeks ago. And we were talking about some of the young players. And he brought up Kravtsov. And it made me think of you when I was on your preseason special show. You were adamant that the guy was terrible. Like, I mean, I couldn't sit here and try to sell you on Kravtsov if I try. Like, I could have given you great odds on. You still wouldn't take the bet, but you were clearly right? So let me ask you this: you evaluated Kravtsov correctly. Just tell me, what do you? At the end of the day, is Lafreniere and Kakko going to be okay, or are they going down the same road here as Kravtsov?
I don't think they play physical, both of them. They play two-way hockey, both of them. They have the head for the game. I think they have to I don't think they're going to be a Kravtsov. I think they have to find the right situation. I don't think they're a Jack Hughes type where they're going to light up the ice every time they're out there. But I think they're going to succeed in the NHL, if not with the Rangers, somewhere else.
Which would be typical.
Well,
Chris brings up a good comparison there in the chat, which is Jones is better than Harper, and I would agree. I would agree with, but
it's a different type of player.
That is true, right? Different type of body size too.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well,
that just shows me that Chris is a contract guy like Cousin Ed.
Right.
He is. Chris and Cousin Ed would get along well. We should have. You know what we should do? We should, in the summer, before we get into football in like August, we should do a show where we get Chris on, we get Cousin Ed, and we could do like kind of like a powwow, an office powwow, like a front office. Like, we're not looking at this as fans. We're looking at this and talking to people that understand the contracts. Thank you guys both, Little Ed, Cousin Ed. Again, we encourage you to check out their show, Rangers.Ed pod. They are very active, where people complain to us that we have not been active in the offseason. These guys are. They had EJ Radic on. I've been watching all your clips. They've had some good stuff. They're now giving out some awards. I've been watching all their content. So we encourage you guys that watch us, that subscribe to us, go watch them. I promise you they will that you will like what you see. Thank you guys for coming on.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeffrey.
There you go. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Very good stuff. It's, you're at the point now where you're like 8 weeks into the offseason for the Rangers. Well, 7, I guess.
You're starting to get that.
You're starting to sit there and be like, man, I wish I could turn on hockey on MSG and watch a game tonight. But
so it sounds like
yes,
we need to be more physical. We need that Mamba mentality. And Panarin needs to kick it up a notch.
Panarin needs to kick it up in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for Artemi Panarin, he's not going. So he's going to hear all this. He can have a great regular season again, and I hope he does. But he's going to have to deliver in the playoffs, or because people are going to be talking about it all year. He can be lighting it up in February when they're playing terrible teams from the Western Conference. He needs to develop. He needs to deliver in the playoffs, or it's going to be the same discussion a year from now.
Now, I remember a little vaguely he was hurt sometimes. Is this an injury thing? He's not lasting the whole year. So maybe we need to maybe we need to pull LeBron James and rest, half the season.
He was injured a little bit, I believe, a year ago, and we'll give him a pass. And he also gets a pass because he scored the Game 7 overtime goal versus Pittsburgh. This year, I haven't read anything that he's been hurt. So I'm going to go on the notion that he just didn't perform under the big lights of Broadway, which is not okay. Performing under the big lights and delivering when it matters. Congratulations to the Vegas Golden Knights, who won the Stanley Cup a week ago by defeating the Florida Panthers 4-1. So two things here went wrong for Florida. One, I told you 3 weeks ago when the Stanley Cup was starting that the worst thing that could happen for Florida was there was 13 days off that they were between their games, between when they played Carolina and when they were playing the Stanley Cup. The worst thing that can happen for a team that is on a run and is red hot like Carolina, I mean, like Florida, is for a long 13-day layoff. Totally. It ruins it. So they had to fight that. They couldn't get their mojo back. And secondly, Matthew Tkachuk got hurt, and that certainly does not hurt. It also came out, as it usually does in hockey, that when a team season ends in the playoffs, a couple weeks or two later, it comes out, oh, this guy was hurt, this guy broke his shoulder, this guy did this. And it seems like we're getting a lot of that out of Florida. But if you are a fan of the Florida Panthers, and I know there are not many of them out there, but if you are a fan of the Florida Panthers, if they come back healthy, they're returning a lot of their pieces. They'll still have Tkachuk. Obviously, Bobrovsky had a good playoffs. They can be, pretty good here. The division that they're in is still Boston, Tampa, and Toronto, and Ottawa is coming up, and Buffalo's coming up in that division too. But if I'm Florida, hey, you know what? I had a good run, but I'm going to return a lot of the pieces, which is good. So, congratulations to them. The Stanley Cup, the schedule, I've been Googling, because normally what the NHL will do is they will release the schedule about a week or two before the draft. The draft is a week and a half from now, so it's the weekend of the no, it's actually next Thursday. So it's like a week and a half. I'm right. So hopefully the schedule comes out soon. That's always a little bit exciting because you can see where they were. And Chris brings up a good point there. Florida played a team that they couldn't bully, whose goalie was able to match theirs. Yep, exactly in line with my thinking. All right, I want to ask you a question.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a question. It's a non-hockey question. Okay. I'm gonna give you my answer.
All right.
Because you threw a question before.
Yeah.
Somebody yesterday wrote in our Q&A a non-hockey question that they wanted us to answer. I don't know if you saw this. Completely random. It's not even sports related.
Okay.
But I'm going to give my answer because I think people are either going to be, most people are going to be annoyed and think it's stupid.
All right.
Someone asked us, what is the most underrated movie of all time?
Ooh.
So I am going to give you.
There's so many.
Yeah, but you can only pick one. Here's my most underrated movie of all time. You ready?
Yeah.
I can promise you there's no one out there that will agree with me. Okay. But I watched this movie every night in college when I was in Boston. Every night I fell asleep to this movie. And when the movie comes on now, and it comes on maybe once a year, Jess knows that we're not changing the channel. Like when this movie's on, this is staying on. I don't care if the Ranger game's on. When this movie's on, we're watching. You ready?
Yeah.
Night at the Roxbury.
That's an underrated movie.
But I'm going a step further. I'm going a step further. Most underrated movie ever.
Most underrated movie. It's tough. Night at the Roxbury is one of them.
Night at the Roxbury is the most underrated movie also because whenever you watch it, if I watch it now for the 138th time, I see something in it I hadn't picked up on before. It happens every time I watch the movie.
We were just talking about this the other day, too. We were just talking about this.
Can I give you another, and actually it's a hockey theme.
Yeah.
The second most underrated movie of all time.
Yeah.
This was the only one that I was going to give Night at the Roxbury a run for, and it works because it's hockey related, I guess. Vegas Vacation.
I think properly rated. It's a great movie.
It's okay. It's not It's underrated, but it's not as underrated as Night at the Roxbury.
Okay. All right. That's tough. Little Nicky, I feel like is an underrated
Never
movie.
saw it.
It's Adam Sandler. It's
Okay.
after Happy Gilmore and Billy Madison. Little Nicky. Shoot. Anchorman, 40-Year-Old Virgin. That whole era is a little underrated. We don't have those movies anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We were just talking about this the other day.
But I'm talking. So, like, I want to define. Let me define what I'm underrated here. It's a good movie, but it doesn't get as much credit. Yeah, it doesn't get the credit it deserves. To me, it's Night at the Roxbury.
I mean, yeah, that's very underrated movie. I don't think it got any credit at all.
No, it never. I don't even remember. I mean, again, it was a long time ago, but I don't remember when it was out in
theaters.
It got
zero credit.
It just became. Didn't it just become a movie that came out on VHS? Because that's what I used to have it on in college.
Yeah.
And then obviously then DVD and all the other stuff. But you never heard. I don't. Chris Kattan and Will Ferrell, but like
it didn't. I think it didn't get any credit because it was a Saturday Night Live.
Molly Shannon is in it.
It was a Saturday Night Live like skit turned movie, right? But it actually had a plot. It actually had a storyline. I think people just wrote it off because it was like a Saturday Night Live skit, so like they didn't really like.
Copland wrote in. It's another one. Good one.
All right.
That's
Super Troopers.
Super Troopers would be up. Yeah, Super Troopers is underrated. But again, I'm going to specifically answer the question that was given to us because I said that we would take Q&A today. The most underrated movie of all time to me is Night at the Roxbury.
We were just talking about this, and I had some good ones.
And
it caught me off guard.
And again, I don't want to sound like a jerk. I don't even think it's close, in my opinion.
Oh, we're having a competition. Yeah, Night at the Roxbury was zero. It was zero rated. Like it got no credit. It was like,
and it's amazing.
And it's a great movie. Yeah, it had a plot. It actually had like a story to it.
Yeah, with the wedding at the end and the father's flower business. I mean, there's John. What's his name?
Chris Kattan.
The famous guy, Johnny, whatever that's in it. The actor.
Where does he play?
He's the guy who Greco. The guy who plays Johnny Greco. He plays a famous guy, and they hit his car, and he doesn't want to get sued, so he gets them in tonight at the Roxbury. That's how they finally get in the. I mean, it's just a phenomenal movie.
Emilio Estevez.
Yeah, the Mighty Ducksman. I swear.
Himself.
See, there's your hockey. There's your hockey
coronation. Ducksman himself.
There you go. See, we always come back to hockey on this show.
It's all connected.
We thank Rangers.Ed Pod for coming on today, talking some Peter Lavalette news as well as some off-season stuff. So the Rangers now, with the coach in place, they will have the press conference actually in a matter of a half hour as we're taping this on June 20th. It is later today. Hopefully you'll get some answers on that. We will be back on next week. I promise you we should be back next week. We are not going to have a little bit of a gap like we had. From there, the Rangers draft next week. You can look for some off-season stuff. We'll do some. We'll go a little bit more in depth with some off-season topics, and we'll go from there. Check out thebamboozleproject.com. We thank them for our sponsorship as always. MYPB is your promo code to save 25%, and you can DM us on Instagram throughout the week.
Absolutely.
Anytime. We'll be around. That's a wrap from here. Thanks for listening. We will talk to you next week.